Hello, my name is John Brink and we are podcasting on the Brink from Prince George, and we have a very, very special guest today, a fellow that I've known for quite a while actually. Kevin Falcon is our guest, and he is the official opposition leader of the BC Liberals actually in Victoria. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Thanks, John. Great to be here, especially with the BC Natural Resource Forum underway. It's good to be back and talk about natural resources.
Big turnout, eh?
Oh,
over
incredible.
1,000 people there.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Good forums, good discussion. Obviously, very much so because of what was announced is 300 people are being laid off because of one of the pulp mills shutting down permanently.
Yeah. The Canfor pulp mill line is shut down, and 300 direct jobs, but as you would well know, there are a lot of indirect impacts too. A lot of contractors and
at least 2
suppliers.
to 1, right?
Exactly.
2 to 3 to 1.
At least 2 to 3 to 1, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's not a good thing for the industry, obviously, but it's there's change that's happening in the industry, and as you know, as a successful business person, and I was saying this to the media today, government's most important role is to just make sure that the rules of the game are clear and understood, and don't keep moving the goalposts on industry. That's what's so frustrating.
Yeah. Capital needs consistency and predictability, whatever that is.
Exactly.
As long as they know.
That's exactly right.
Right? They must know, because then they will adjust, but they have to know the reality.
That's exactly right. That's the biggest message I tried to deliver. So
now, on the other hand, in all fairness, though, Kevin, and you've been around, politics for a long time, since 1980, about when you first got involved, and then, till about 2013, when you took a bit of a break, and then you got back.
2001 was when I first got elected. Yeah.
And then in 2021, you came back, and you've been very active, and now you are the leader of the official opposition.
That's right.
That then being said, you know a lot about the industry and the forest industry, but also about all the other things that are directly, indirectly affecting it, because you were, for a period, you were Minister of Finance, Development,
Transportation,
Health,
and Deregulation.
Indeed, I was looking for that.
Yeah.
Because so you were deputy premier.
That's right.
As well, and so there are few people that have had as broad experience as you have had politically. And then during that big period of that time, I knew you because we all kind of floated around in the political arenas, and so looking at the forest industry, since that's the topic today more than anything else, and is that, agree with me if you can, is that I always believe there is no place more advantageously located than BC in terms of, from a market perspective, in terms of access to China, the US, and Europe.
Absolutely.
There is no place that has more infrastructure in place in terms of rail, air, road than we have, all critical elements.
Yes, absolutely.
And then looking at the forest industry, and we have two industries a little bit different. The one is the coast, distinctly different from what we have here,
in the north,
and then we have the interior, and then close to 90% of the forest or the harvesting comes out of the interior of British Columbia, and obviously over the last period in particular, since about 2000, we had the pine beetle pandemic that pretty much clean out all of the lodgepole pine.
Yes.
And then initially it had an uplift, and then from there on in it had to come back down to where it used to be, about 60 million cubic meters per annually. And then in addition to all of that, we had fires 2018, 19, and then then we had old growth deferrals and a number of other issues, and so subsequently the annual allowable cut has been reduced to more like 40 million cubic meters annually, resulting in about 35 sawmills shutting down throughout the province. But I usually tell people that ask me questions about that, then I say the one follows virtually the other, because about 4 to 5 sawmills are required to feed a pulp mill. So that if you have that number of closures of sawmills, then eventually it will affect the pulp capacity.
Absolutely. There's no question about that. And I think this will unfortunately not be the last pulp closure that we are going to see.
No question about that.
Yeah.
And why is that? Well, we may see even more closures of sawmills as we are adjusting in other areas of the province.
That's right.
That then being said, though, Kevin, is that and I'm also the longest-serving director of COFI. I'm also the vice chair of COFI, amazingly, anyway, because I'm the only one around the COFI table that has no tenure. And I've been in business for 50 years.
Yeah,
50
remarkable.
As a secondary manufacturer. Started virtually with nothing and had to find a way of a unique product that I could manufacture and access fibers. So I had experience in Europe where I had seen people gluing short pieces together, and so I developed a finger jointing concept in 1975. Nobody was doing it in Canada.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then built quite a company from that. And Brink Forest Products, or the Brink group of companies now today, although there have been lots of struggles. And before you leave, I wrote a book about it, Against All Odds.
Right.
Not about hurrah, John, but the challenges along the way.
Yes, yeah.
And I'm going to give you a copy of that.
Oh,
and,
super. Yeah.
But in any event, gradually build it up to where we now have an operation here, 2 operations in Prince George. We have one in Vanderbilt, we have one in Houston. All of them together, if all things were normal, we are somewhat curtailed now, temporary, because of slowdowns of the sawmills, but we employ close to 400 people direct.
Yeah, wow.
Without one single nickel from government and handouts or subsidies, or without tenure.
Yeah, remarkable.
So, what I'm saying is, where should the industry go from here?
Yeah, yeah.
One of the areas that I hear over and over again, and I have said it myself, that too much of the timber is controlled by 4 or 5 companies that have control 75% of the AAC.
Yeah.
If you control 75%, you control it all. Unfortunately, and I can't blame them necessarily, because those a lot of times are public companies, they are responsible to their shareholders, and they have decided to invest elsewhere. In the meantime, though, what I'm saying is, why is that? Well, because they have difficulty being competitive globally because of their cost here.
Yeah. That's right.
I believe that there are a number of factors that have been affecting it. The one is the stumpage calculations that we have, I believe, are broken and should be redone so that they are more responsive. Secondly, I believe that the deferral program, although I believe in old growth deferral as it relates to these big
real
trees.
old growth.
Yeah, but now a lot of times,
I know,
even these size are because they happen to be 150 years or older. I think all of that has gone a bit too far, and should be looked at. And then the other part that I think is so important to me, I have a passion for the lumber industry. And I love Canada, I love British Columbia in particular, and I love the forest industry. I think we have to have more secondary manufacturing, and we can have that and be competitive in globally. And primaries and secondaries are working together. There are too many initiatives now that we have that work against that happening. And I believe that's something that politicians have to look at and say, what can we do to improve that?
Yeah, no, I would agree with 95% of what you say, quite honestly, John, because I don't think there's any doubt that the industry has to undergo change. There's no question about that. I think, my viewpoint has changed over the years too, candidly, because I think we have to recognize that while the majors do have an obligation to their shareholders, we have an obligation to our shareholders, which is communities and individuals and, First Nations. And so I do think we're going to have to do things differently. And I don't pretend to have all the answers, by the way, but I do know what is needed. And what is needed is sitting down and listening to people, first of all, that understand the industry, people like yourself, local First Nations, community leaders, and really get a better sense of how can this different forest industry look going forward. And then make some decisions that provide that certainty that is going to allow capital to look at it and say, okay, now we understand where the goalposts are.
Exactly.
We're either prepared to invest or not. Some of the majors may say, you know what, we can get better returns elsewhere, and that may be a price we pay. But there will be others. There will be local companies that will start out small and grow bigger.
No question about that.
And I just have no doubt. So I think that, as I'm here at this, Natural Resource Forum, one of the things that concerned me when I heard our Premier here speaking the other day was not once did I hear anything about LNG. The single largest private sector investment in the history of our country is taking place right now, and there wasn't even a word about LNG. And I think that's really unfortunate, because at a time when we've got so much instability in the world, where we've got the president of Germany and leader of Japan recently here in Canada saying, we'd really like to access some of your sustainably produced natural resources, and that could really help us in Europe and in Asia. That's an opportunity for Canada that we should be jumping all over.
No question.
And I just don't see that happening, and that's, I think, a big miss.
Yeah, no, and I agree with that. The other one is that, we start out like this, in my opinion, that the forest, not so in other parts of the world necessarily, but here in BC, the forest belongs to you and me, the people. And with that, and access to that timber is a privilege. And with that go certain obligations. And I believe once we approach it from that particular level, and that government, provincial government in particular, is a partner in all of this. And we have to look at it also in other areas. That if I look at northern British Columbia in particular, how come there is not as much forest manufacturing there? Well, because the distance or the hauling cost is too high.
Right.
There is an opportunity, I believe, for government to say, okay, maybe we are a partner with these other companies, and we have to find ways in which we can make that cost marketable in other areas, in some form or fashion.
Yeah. Well, certainly lots of policy work to do, but I look forward to tackling some of those issues as Premier.
So now, and I know you have to go, but one more thing that is close to me is that for many years I've here advocated the biggest challenge that we will have here as we build beyond all the crises that we have in the meantime is access to a skilled workforce. And very recently an investment was made at BCIT, I think for $270 million. And BCIT, I think it's a great organization.
Absolutely.
It's massive. We are trying to develop a center of excellence in the Prince George region for the northern BC that duplicates not exactly what they have there, but to develop the skill sets here. If I look at the College of New Caledonia here, a lot of the people that are finishing their education there stay in the north. UNBC, another perfect example. A lot of those people here stay in the north. We have to look at how can we incent government to say maybe what we have to do is look at a center of excellence where we can help from an educational process to develop entrepreneurship and develop those skill sets that we need for those people that are willing to invest here.
Yeah. Well, you're pushing an open door here, because I mean that's very consistent with the time that I was in government, where we did programs like the Northern Medical Program, et cetera, because we recognize that, if we train doctors in the North, there's a very good chance that they'll end up staying and practicing in the North. And that turned out to be the case. And it's no different for other skilled trades.
Right.
So that's something I'd be very supportive of for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, are we running out of time here?
No, let's talk about a little more personal stuff. Do you want to touch on that?
Yeah. Okay. So tell me a little bit about, the personal stuff, about your family. You got...
Sure. Well, my family, so first of all, I was born and raised in a family of 6 boys.
Yeah.
And, so I feel very fortunate. My mother was a nurse. My dad was a small business person that owned a small retail shop in North Vancouver. And, wasn't the easiest upbringing sometimes, but I was lucky because I went to a Catholic high school called Vancouver College. Yeah. They had a program for lower income families that they would sponsor us. So I was one of the lucky ones that got sponsored by the school to be able to go there. And I've never forgotten that. In fact, I was at the 100th anniversary luncheon of Vancouver College to help raise money for bursaries to support kids like myself that had the benefit of getting sponsored through the school. And I've never forgotten that because that, opened up opportunities for me that were really important, and that allowed me to go on to university and to further my education. And
you went to UBC, right?
I went to SFU actually, and UBC. So I went to SFU for my undergrad, and I did a real estate program at UBC. So sort of touched on both schools. Yeah. And today I'm now married to my beautiful wife Jessica, and we have 2 daughters, Josephine who's 12 and Rose who's 9. Yeah. Yeah.
How quickly it all goes. Right?
Oh my goodness, it's incredible. And that's why I left politics actually, because of my kids.
So you left politics in 2013, I believe. Then Gordon Campbell, who was premier, decided to step back, and then you and Christy Clark competed for the leadership, and then it was a neck on neck kind of but then after that you worked closely together.
That's right.
And you became deputy premier.
That's right. Yeah.
And then in 2013 you took a break.
That's right. And I spent 10 years in the private sector as a senior executive with a company called Anthem Capital. We made investments in all kinds of sectors, high tech, natural resources, but our primary business was real estate development. So a lot of projects throughout BC, mostly in the Lower Mainland, to be candid, but we own a lot of income properties, including up here in northern BC in terms of shopping malls, food and booze, drugs anchored shopping malls. Yeah. And we also have operations in Alberta and in Northern California. And I enjoyed that immensely. And I got to not only work back in the private sector, but I got involved in some board work, doing some charity work for Canuck Place and for the Street to Home Foundation, working with homelessness in the Lower Mainland and a bunch of other things. And I really, really enjoyed that. And, but the reason I came back to politics, to be honest with you, was
2021, right?
Yeah, 2021 was because of my kids. Not them specifically, but that generation. And I just really felt it was important as I looked around and I saw this government, and I think they're well intentioned. I really do. I just think they don't know what they're doing, frankly, especially on the economics. And I just felt it was important. I want my kids to grow up knowing the kind of that sense of opportunity that we have in British Columbia that I felt growing up. Right. I want to make sure we don't lose that. Right. And that's why I've come back.
Yeah. And now you are the minister or the head of the the opposition party.
Yes. Yeah.
And so that then being said, there could be an election anytime. So that's how it basically works in British Columbia. We never quite. Well, they schedule every 4 years, right?
Yeah. Well, it's actually more than that. We passed a law while we were in government that said there's going to be fixed election dates. Right. And the reason we did that is we wanted to get away from this, the ability of politicians to manipulate and call the election whenever they felt like it was convenient. Yeah. We didn't like that. And although it took away maybe something that might work in our favor, because you never know, when you set a date, it could be in the middle of a recession or some crisis or what have you. Yeah. But we still felt it was the right thing to do. And I'm proud of that. Yeah. Now this government, unfortunately, this NDP government, in 2020, they called the election because it was convenient for them, and they used the pandemic as an excuse. and they shouldn't have,
And
because
they had a minority government.
they had a minority government with the Greens.
It was the Greens, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
2 Green Party
And that
MLAs.
didn't quite work as well as they were hoping it would.
Well,
I don't know.
Well, I don't know, but the NDP got a majority government, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
maybe it did
yeah.
work for them. But the point is that the next election is scheduled for October 2024.
Okay.
But because of their past decisions, and because I think David Eby will do whatever he thinks is going to be in his interests,
Right.
I've said to my group, look, we've got to be ready for an election at any time, so
Yeah.
including this spring. And now David Eby's been very clear; he's not going to call an election. So if he did, it would be interesting, because I can guarantee you the media will roll back the tape and say, well, you were very clear about not calling one. But I've said to my team, we have to be ready anyhow. But I suspect it'll be earlier than October 2024. Whether it's this spring or in the fall, we'll see. But we'll be ready.
Yeah. Now, the other thing, and again, talking about family, is that, your job is very demanding.
Yes.
It's a 24/7 job. Yeah. A lot of people don't fully appreciate that, but that even if you're an opposition leader, it means you have to always be ready
Yes.
whenever. Right?
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
so you have to have a family that is 100% on site and supportive.
Yeah, very much, and I'm very lucky that way. My wife Jessica is very, very supportive of me doing this. I honestly. Initially, I think she was saying, why are you doing this? Like, why would you do this? But she also recognized that it was a bit of a passion issue for me.
Yeah.
And, I think that we're put on this earth to some degree to follow our passions and to do, not necessarily, because it doesn't make any sense for me financially, and it certainly doesn't make sense in terms of the time I'll have to be away from my family. But it is something that I feel is important, that if you have something you think you can offer to make a contribution to the betterment of your province, people do it in different ways. You've done it as an entrepreneur, and the volunteer work that you've done, and the dollars that you've donated. Yeah. And and I've done it both in the private sector, but the public sector contribution, I think, is something that I can make a difference.
Right.
And so and it's great, because I'm at a stage in my life, John, where I really feel like I could just be honest with the public and say, look, I don't pretend to have all the answers, but I think I've got a skill set here that is a little more than what the current Premier has. And that I'm not afraid to make decisions.
And you have the experience.
And I've got the experience. And I think that experience, that private and public sector experience, is what we need right now.
Right.
Right now, our friends in the NDP government have lots of experience being politicians. They have virtually no experience in the private sector. Right. And we do have to have people that understand how the private sector thinks and works, because that's how you're going to create the conditions necessary to instill confidence and investment and economic growth.
Yeah. The other part, Kevin, that I believe, I was born in 1940, and so it makes me 82. And, we were liberated by the Canadians
That's right.
April the 12th, 1945. Yeah. And, and I was 5 years old, or nearly 5 years old, and it made such an impression on me, even from that time forward, that I always knew I was going to go to Canada.
Oh, really?
To the land of my heroes.
Oh, yeah. Isn't that something?
Absolutely.
Isn't that something?
I was trying to go when I was 17, and my parents wouldn't let me. Then I was drafted into the Dutch Air Force. And then after I came out of there, I worked in the lumber industry. My dad managed a small lumber mill, didn't own it. Yeah. And then I worked for the larger companies in Holland, importing lumber companies. So that was my passion. And
wow.
And then I was not very good at school, and I failed grade 3. Yeah. And I failed grade 7 3 times.
Oh my goodness!
And
wow.
then they had to say, well, should we send him to the mentally challenged school, or do we get him a job?
Yeah.
Fortunately, they got me a job, and then it took me till I was 57 here, when I was in a bookstore and I opened a book, and the book said, "Driven to Distractions, ADHD," and I said, now I finally know who I am. And yes. I wrote in that, in Dutch, because I was ashamed of it. Yeah. What am I going to do? Tell the banker I'm mentally disturbed, or mental challenges?
Yeah.
Now, obviously, that has disappeared more and more. Yeah. And I wrote a book about that as well. And I'm going to give you a copy of that. And
well, isn't that great? Because I think, John, as you're looking for the book, think of all the kids out there right now that struggle. They may be dyslexic, or they may have ADHD, or they may be on the autism spectrum. And I know many of those kids, are in school thinking, I'm stupid. I'm not understanding this. And you're a living, breathing example of the fact that don't let these, these so-called barriers get in the way of the ultimate success that they can really become. So,
and that's exactly what I did, is that in Holland, I felt then that I wanted to go to Canada, and I wanted to prove that I could do it to myself more than anybody else. I still didn't know exactly what it was.
Yeah.
And, and then, I wanted to start out with no money. I left with $150 from Schiphol with two sets of clothes.
Wow.
And 3 books. I still have the 3 books.
Yeah.
And then when I came to Vancouver, I couldn't speak the language, and I went to the immigration office. Fortunately, there was a German fellow, and I told him I could speak some German, and I told him what I wanted to do. I want to build a rumble mill. And he said, Prince George. 1965,
Really?
yeah.
Isn't that
and
something?
I was in the bus to Prince George, and when I came off the
love
bus about 2 blocks away from here, I had my suitcase, then I counted my money, and I had exactly $25.47.
Wow. Isn't that something?
And then underneath it, you will read attitude, passion, work ethic, but follows success.
Well, I got to tell you, I'll end on this note by saying that I love hearing these stories because, for some of your viewers that may be from out of the province or country, it's important they understand that we are a nation of immigrants. And last night I was having dinner with some of my South Asian friends here in Prince George that started out as workers in a mill at 17 years old, not speaking a lick of English.
Exactly.
And today, successful business owners, they own real estate, they own businesses. They've done very, very well. And I'm so proud of the Chinese community, the South Asian community, and all the different waves of immigrants that have come here from Holland, from Germany, from the Ukraine, all over the world that have made BC their home, and they've raised a family and built a future. And that's exactly the kind of province I want it to be going forward.
And so what is in my mind is that, that is, and that's really where I was going with this, there is absolutely no place on earth that is better than Canada, in particular British Columbia. And every time I fly a lot, you do too, I always sit by the window and I look out of the window and I say, it's paradise.
Yes.
And fortunately, we have a place in North Saanich, and I just love North Saanich. And the reason for it is that otherwise I'm at the mill 24/7.
Yeah, and you got to drag yourself
I have to physically remove myself.
Yeah.
So at one time, when you have a little bit more time, right now you're going to be very, very involved in meetings that you're doing.
Yeah.
And if you come back again, I want to give you a tour of my operation.
Sure.
And then, and kind of show you what we are doing. And talking about, in particular, a changing forest industry where we have innovative primary in combination with intensive secondary. And I believe that we can do it here. That's how the new industry will look as we go forward, in my opinion.
Yeah, sounds good. I'll take you up on that. Thanks a lot, John.
Thank you. And
Appreciate
I'll give a couple of books.
Okay. No, that's great.
Thank you.
Love to read.
Thank you.